So today we are going to work on adding integers. The first thing that I'm going to show you is how to model integer addition on a number line. If we begin with the example, -3 plus -6, it's important to know that when adding a negative integer, we move to the left on a number line. So if I'm beginning with -3, I locate it on the number line first. -3 is located right here. That is the integer I'm beginning with, so I just plot it on the number line first. And then if I'm adding -6, I move to the left that number of spaces. So I will take -3, because I'm adding -6, I will move to the left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 places. And where I end up is my solution. So because I ended up at -9, -3 plus -6 is -9. For the second example, I'm going to be adding -7 to 4. This time, I'm adding a positive integer. So when adding a positive integer, we move to the right on the number line. So just like I did before, I'm going to model this by putting my first number on the number line. -7 is located right here, and I'm adding a +4 to -7, so I'm going to move to the right on the number line. 4 spaces. So from -7, I move to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. I end up at -3, so I can tell you that -7 plus 4 is -3. Now, to make this slightly easier for some of you, there are a couple of rules that you can remember to help you with integer addition. There are only 2. And the first one is, when you're adding 2 integers, if the signs are the same, add the absolute values and keep the sign. So, just a few examples. If I'm adding these 2 integers, -5 plus -8, I can see that they have the same sign. They're both negative. So -5 plus -8, well, I know that 5 plus 8 is 13, and because they're both negative, -5 plus -8 is -13. Same thing for any 2 negative integers. You just add their absolute values and you keep the negative. So if I have -4 plus -3, well, 4 plus 3 is 7, so -4 plus -3 is -7. Likewise, for integers that are both positive, this is exactly like everything you've always known. So if I have 6 plus 4, well, they're both positive, so 6 plus 4 is +10. Same thing if I have 15 plus 6. Well, they're both positive. 15 plus 6 is 21, so my answer is positive. But now, if the signs are different, we find the difference between their absolute values, and we keep the sign of the integer with the largest absolute value. And something that I just like to say is, if the signs are different, find the difference. So here's an example for you. If I have 3 plus -1, I automatically notice that the signs are different. One is positive, one is negative. Well, I think to myself, what's the difference between 3 and 1? The difference between 3 and 1 is 2. And so I know that 2 is at least part of my answer, and the last thing I have to think is, well, which one of these numbers has the largest absolute value? That number would be 3, and because 3 is positive, that means my solution is positive, so it just remains a +2. Same thing for the problem -5 plus 7. Signs are different, so I think, what's the difference between 7 and 5? Well, the difference is 2. Which of these signs, or which of these numbers has the largest absolute value? Well, that's 7, and 7 is positive, so my answer is positive. Here, think to yourself. The difference between 5 and 7 is 2. My answer is positive. 7 has the greatest absolute value, and it's positive, so my answer is positive as well. Ooh. So here are just some examples that we're going to work through together. The directions are simply to add. Directions might also say find the sum. So if I'm adding -7 and -4, I recognize that the signs are the same, so I'm simply going to add and keep the sign. 7 plus 4, that is 11, and because they're both negative, my answer is going to be -11. Negative 15 plus negative 5. Again, signs are the same. Add and keep the signs. So negative 15 plus negative 5. Well, 15 plus 5 is 20. And so since they're both negative, then that must mean my answer is negative 20. And then we have 11 plus 6. Well, 11 plus 6, well, they're both positive. So I just add 11 plus 6. I get 17. Nothing tricky here. They're both positive, so my answer is positive. And for our last set of examples, we're going to be adding two integers in which the signs are different. So remember, find the difference and take the sign of the number with the largest absolute value. So here I have negative 12 plus 19. I noticed that the signs are different, so I have to find the difference. There's no shame in going off to the side and finding the difference on your paper. So I think, what's the difference between 19 and 12? Well, I might have to come over to the side and say, well, 19 minus 12, well, that's 7. And so I know part of my answer is 7. The last thing I have to remember is find out which of these has the largest absolute value. 19 is the furthest from 0, and it's positive, so my answer is positive 7. For example B, negative 4 plus 8. Well, signs are different. Find the difference. What's the difference between 8 and 4? The difference is 4, and 8 has the larger absolute value, and 8 is positive, so my answer is positive. My last example is 23 plus negative 35. Again, my signs are different, so I need to find the difference. The difference between 35 and 23 is, and you can come over to the side and do that if you need to. I always do this. So the answer is 12 for the difference, but then remember, I have to find out which of these numbers has a larger absolute value. And I know that 35 is a larger absolute value than 23, and in this case, 35 is negative, and so my answer needs to be negative 12.